What if I told you that your fear of death isn't really about dying, it's about never having truly lived? That the anxiety gnawing at the edges of your quiet moments isn't about the end, but about the parts of you still waiting to be born? Death isn't chasing you, it's reminding you that time is slipping, that masks are heavy, and that one day, whether you're ready or not, you'll have to face yourself without them. The question is, will you meet that moment as a stranger, or as someone who has already awakened? Most people move through life asleep, eyes open, routines intact, calendars full, but deeply unaware of the one truth that makes everything else matter. We are going to die, and I don't say that to inspire fear. I say it to awaken something deeper, because the awareness of mortality isn't the end of joy, it's the beginning of wisdom. When you truly know, not just intellectually but in your bones, that your time is limited, suddenly everything you do takes on a different texture. The conversations you once postponed become urgent. The apologies you delayed now feel essential. The risk you avoided, the dreams you shelved, the people you took for granted, all of it comes into focus. The clock doesn't start ticking when we grow old. It's been ticking since the moment we arrived, but most of us don't hear it until it's almost too late. It's easy to live in denial, to keep our minds occupied with noise and busyness so we don't have to face that quiet truth. But denial doesn't protect us. It only delays the moment we're forced to confront what's always been there. And the irony is, the longer we ignore death, the more power it has over us. We become anxious, afraid. We try to control what cannot be controlled. We seek permanence in things that were never meant to last. And all of that effort leaves us drained, scattered, and disconnected from what really matters. But something changes, something radical, when you stop running. When you pause and let the truth of death in, not as an enemy but as a teacher. Because if you're willing to sit with it, death will show you how to live. It will strip away the nonsense. It will silence the ego. It will remind you that every moment is borrowed and every breath is a miracle. Think about how we treat our days. We waste hours scrolling through lives that are not ours. We say yes to things we don't believe in. We hold grudges that poison our hearts. We numb ourselves with distractions. Why? Because we assume there will be time, more time, later, always later. But what if there isn't? What if this is it? That question doesn't paralyze you, it wakes you up. It brings urgency, but not the anxious kind, the sacred kind, the kind that reminds you to speak the truth now, to forgive now, to love now, because death is not the tragedy unlived life is. A life spent pretending, a life spent pleasing, a life spent waiting. There's a strange peace that comes when you truly grasp that none of this is guaranteed. The little things that once triggered you, they lose their grip. The opinions of others, they fade into background noise. The chase for validation, it starts to feel hollow. What rises in its place is presence, deep, grounded presence, because when you know time is short, you stop rushing through it. You begin to pay attention to your breath, to your body, to the person in front of you, to the sound of your own thoughts. And from that space, wisdom grows, not the kind you get from books or lectures, but the kind that lives in your gut. The kind that guides you toward what's real and pulls you away from what's not. When you live with mortality in view, you start choosing differently. You start asking deeper questions. Who am I really? What am I here to give? What have I left unsaid, unloved, unlived? Those are the questions that shape a meaningful life. Not, how much do I have? But who have I become? Not, how long will I live? But how deeply have I felt? When you start thinking that way, you realize the fear of death isn't the enemy. It's the invitation. It's what opens the door to truth. So, we can either live in fear of the end, or we can use the end as fuel. Fuel to live with integrity, to show up fully, to stop waiting for someday. Because the truth is someday is a lie. There's only now, and now is where life begins. We often speak about life and death as if they're two separate things, like opposing forces battling it out, life trying to hold on, death trying to take away. But that's not how it works. Death isn't the opposite of life. It's not some foreign invader that comes and steals what was never meant to end. It's part of life, woven into its fabric, present in every single moment, not just at the end, but throughout the journey. To see death as separate is to misunderstand the very nature of existence. We're taught to fear death because we've been conditioned to see it as a failure, something that interrupts life, something we must resist. But have you ever really looked at nature? Everything in the natural world understands death differently. The tree lets go of its leaves in autumn without resistance. The flower blooms, withers, and falls with quiet grace. The waves rise and dissolve back into the sea without protest. Nothing clings, nothing panics. It's only we, with our minds and our identities, who fight the inevitable. There's a deeper peace available to us when we begin to understand that life is a cycle, not a straight line. Birth and death are not start and finish. They are transitions, doorways, and just like you cannot have day without night, you cannot have life without death. They give each other meaning. One defines the other. Without death, life wouldn't be precious. It would have no urgency, no shape, no beauty. The finiteness of it, that's what gives it depth. We see this clearly when we lose someone we love. Their absence echoes through us, not because they're truly gone, but because their presence changed us. Death teaches us to pay attention. Remember that everything we touch is temporary, but temporary doesn't mean meaningless. In fact, it's the opposite. A sunset is temporary, and that's what makes it breathtaking. A song ends, and that's what makes it complete. A life ends, and that's what makes every second of it sacred. The fear many people carry is rooted in the illusion of permanence. We want things to stay. We want people to remain. We want to hold on. But life is always changing. Every breath is a small death and a small birth. Inhale, exhale, receive, release. Even in your own body, cells are dying and being replaced constantly. You are a walking cycle. So why do we resist the bigger cycle? Because we believe we are the form. We identify with the body, the name, the achievements, the story, but those are just expressions, temporary containers. What lives beneath them, the awareness, the essence that doesn't fear death because it knows it's not separate from it. The soul doesn't see death as an end, it sees it as a return. When you start to live from that place, the place that knows death is not an interruption, but a continuation. Something softens. You don't cling so hard. You love more freely. You forgive more easily. You stop wasting time on things that don't feed your spirit, because suddenly you're not trying to outrun death. You're walking with it, not in fear, but in understanding. Not as an enemy, but as a companion who reminds you to live with intention. This isn't about being morbid. It's about being real. The people who live the most fully are the ones who have made peace with death. Not because they gave up on life, but because they finally started to cherish it. They know they're not owed tomorrow, so they show up fully today. They're not obsessed with legacy or fear of being forgotten. They're focused on being fully present in this conversation, in this moment, in this breath. What happens after death? None of us can say for certain. But what we can know without doubt is that death belongs to life. And when we embrace that, we stop living on the surface. We go deeper. We begin to notice the sacred in the ordinary, a glance, a laugh, a tear, a sunrise. Noticing these things is preparation for death, because it means you're actually living. So if you're afraid of dying, look closer. Often, what you're really afraid of is never having truly lived. And the moment you start to understand that death is not the opposite of life, but part of it, is the moment you finally start to feel alive. When we talk about death, what we're really talking about, at least most of the time, is the fear of the ego disappearing, That constructed sense of self, the one made up of our name, our job title, our successes, our stories, our roles. It's that identity we cling to so tightly because it gives us shape in the world. It tells us who we are, or at least who we think we are. And when death appears on the horizon, the ego panics because it knows it won't survive it. The ego is fragile. It needs validation. It needs recognition. It constantly seeks to prove its worth through comparison, achievement, and control. And when it imagines death, it sees annihilation, an ending, a total erasure of everything it has built. That's why the thought of death shakes people. It feels like losing everything, even ourselves. But the ego is not the whole story. In fact, it's not even the real story. It's just the surface. Beneath it, if we slow down and listen closely, there is something quieter, something far more still and spacious. That is the soul, and the soul doesn't fear death. The soul understands that what we are is not limited to this body, this name, or this brief appearance in time. The soul knows eternity, not as an idea, but as its native language. The deeper truth is that you were never just your story. You were never just your image. Those are costumes. They have value, they serve a role, but they are not you. You are the awareness behind all of it. You are the observer of the thoughts, not the thoughts themselves. You are the light shining through the roles, not the roles you play. And when death comes, it doesn't come to that part of you. It only comes to what was never truly permanent to begin with. The ego fears death because it cannot see beyond itself. It only knows how to survive by holding on. It's always trying to control, to grasp, to preserve what is inevitably passing. That's why people chase legacy, chase fame, chase security, because somewhere the ego hopes that if it builds a strong enough fortress, it can outlast the end. But no fortress is stronger than time. Everything external eventually fades. What remains is what was never born to begin with. This shift from ego to soul isn't something that happens once and then you're done. It's a practice, a daily remembering, because we live in a world that constantly invites us back into ego, into performance, into comparison, into fear. But every time we turn inward, every time we return to silence, we realign with that part of us that doesn't need to be seen or praised or remembered to be real. It just is. And when you start to live from that place, something beautiful happens. You stop trying to protect your image and start trying to live from your truth. You stop asking, "What will people think of me when I'm gone?" and start asking, "How deeply did I love while I was here?" You stop fearing death as a thief and begin to see it as a mirror, one that shows you what truly matters, because the soul is not afraid to return to the unknown. It's not attached to permanence. It trusts the cycle. It knows that just as we came from something greater than ourselves, we return to it, and in between, we get to dance, to learn, to love, to awaken. That's not a punishment. That's a gift. What you truly are is not bound by time. It's not limited by the body. It's not confined to this lifetime. And once you begin to see that clearly, death loses its power, not because you become indifferent to life, but because you finally see through the illusion that anything real can ever be lost. The body passes, the personality dissolves, but the light continues, and that's why we must learn to live from the soul now, not later, not when it's convenient, not when we're old, now, because the ego may fear endings, but the soul knows there are none. Only transitions, only awakenings. The truth is, nothing eternal can ever die. When people say they're afraid of death, what they're often really afraid of is reaching the end of their life and realizing they never truly lived it. That quiet, aching regret, that's what haunts people more than death itself. Not the final moment, but all the missed ones that came before it. The choices not made, the love not expressed, the risks not taken. The voice not used. Fear of death is often just a mirror held up to an unlived life. We spend so much time chasing distractions, achievements, approval, checking boxes that don't lead to fulfillment, but only to more noise. We stay busy, not because we're deeply alive, but because stillness scares us. Because in stillness, we might have to face the truth that we're not living as fully as we could be. So we fill the silence with plans and goals and metrics. We define success by external markers, money, recognition, security. And slowly, without realizing it, we trade our soul for safety. We lose aliveness in exchange for acceptance. And when death finally comes close, the panic isn't just about leaving this world. It's about never having fully shown up in it. A life well lived doesn't fear its end. When you've tasted joy deeply, when you've followed the pull of your purpose, when you've given your whole heart to something real, there's a kind of peace that begins to settle in. It's not about having a perfect story or leaving behind a flawless legacy. It's about presence. It's about looking back and knowing, I was here. I didn't hide. I didn't sleepwalk through it. I faced it, felt it, gave what I could, and lived from something true. We think we have time. That's the most seductive lie we tell ourselves. We think we can postpone passion, honesty, love for later. But death makes one thing very clear. There is no later. There is only now, and the now is slipping away every second. We're so afraid of loss, yet we forget that not living is the biggest loss of all. We fear the pain of death, yet we endure the slow pain of disconnection, of unexpressed truth, every single day without questioning it. When you see someone who is fully alive, it's not because they have no fear, it's because they've made peace with it. They know death is coming, and they've decided to live in such a way that when it does, they'll be ready. Not because they've controlled the future, but because they've honored the present. They've said the things that matter. They've taken the leaps that scared them. They've learned to listen to that still voice inside that says, "This is who you are. This is what you're here for." They don't wait for permission. They don't need guarantees. They know that fulfillment isn't about how long you live, it's about how deep you go while you're here. Ask yourself, if it all ended tomorrow, would you feel complete? Would there be things left unsaid, dreams untouched, love withheld? That's not a morbid question. That's a wake-up call. Because if the answer is yes, then what are we waiting for? What's more important than becoming fully alive in the limited time we have? The people who live with depth are not those who have the most years, but those who have the most presence in each year. They've realized that the fear of death can be a powerful teacher. It strips away the false urgency and reveals the real one. It reminds us that today is not a rehearsal, it's the show. This is it, right now. No dress rehearsal, no guarantee of more time, no backup plan. And the irony is, when you stop resisting death, when you allow the truth of it to humble you, to focus you, you don't become less joyful. You become more, because everything becomes sacred. The small moments, the little gestures, the quiet beauty of ordinary life. You stop waiting for some perfect future and start living the life you already have. So if you feel the fear of death rising within you, don't push it away. Don't cover it with distraction or denial. Sit with it, listen to it. Let it ask you the only question that matters. Are you truly living? Because when the answer becomes yes, the fear begins to fade, and what replaces it is peace. There's something powerful that happens when you stop running from the noise, from the distractions, from your thoughts. When you finally sit still, without the urge to reach for a screen or a task or a conversation just to fill the space, something begins to open up. That's where real peace lives, not in achievement, not in control, but in silence. And it's through that inner silence that we begin to make peace with the greatest mystery of all, our mortality. The mind hates silence because it can't dominate it. It can't control or label it. Silence exposes the ego's noise for what it is: temporary, repetitive, and often fearful. And when you truly enter that silence, you start to feel what lies beyond thought, beyond language. That's where you touch something deeper, something not bound by time, something that doesn't fear the end, because it never began in the first place. You see, most people fear death because they've never truly been alone with themselves. The silence reminds them of how fragile the identity is. That voice in their head, the one that narrates their whole life, suddenly has nothing to say, and that scares them. But the soul isn't afraid of silence. In fact, silence is its native tongue. In silence, the soul isn't drowned out by ego or opinion. It speaks, not with words, but with presence. And if you stay with it, if you surrender to the stillness long enough, you begin to hear something incredibly honest. A kind of knowing arises that doesn't come from books or theories. It comes from direct contact with your essence. We live in a world that teaches us to escape silence. We're constantly plugged into something, scrolling, watching, consuming, reacting. We're afraid of what we might feel if we stopped. But that fear is precisely the doorway we must walk through, because beyond the discomfort is the truth, and the truth is, you are not the noise, you are not the fear. You are the awareness holding all of it, and awareness doesn't die. It simply observes change. When you learn to be still, you start to see death not as a wall, but as a horizon, something you move toward, not something that comes to take something away. Silence doesn't numb you to life's realities. It prepares you to meet them fully, with grace. The more comfortable you become with inner quiet, the more resilient you become in the face of endings. Not because you don't feel them, but because you finally understand that the core of you is untouched by them. Think about the moments in your life that felt most real, the ones where time seemed to stop. Maybe it was sitting by the ocean, or looking into the eyes of someone you love, or walking under a night sky where the stars whispered to you without saying a word. What was present in all of those moments? Silence, not emptiness, not absence, but fullness without noise. That's the silence I'm talking about. That's the place where life and death shake hands. The more time you spend in that space, the less you fear death, because you begin to realize that who you are, your deepest self, is already beyond it. Silence teaches you that you are not your fears, your regrets, your unfinished plans. You are the one who witnesses them all. And once you really feel that, not just intellectually but experientially, death stops being a threat. It becomes part of the symphony. So how do we prepare for death? We stop avoiding life. We stop avoiding ourselves. We stop filling the space and start listening to it. We let silence be our teacher. We sit with it, not to escape, but to remember. Remember what we've always been, beneath the identity, beneath the striving, beneath the noise. In that remembering, a quiet peace grows. It doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to convince. It just is. And when you carry that peace into your days, you begin to live with a kind of lightness. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop resisting its flow. You stop trying to grip the river and instead allow it to carry you, knowing that the source, the place it's taking you, was never separate from you to begin with. The silence within you knows that death is not the end. It's just the next breath. There's a mysterious phrase that's echoed through spiritual traditions for centuries: die before you die. On the surface, it sounds paradoxical. How can one die while still alive? But this isn't about physical death. It's about ego death. It's about shedding the false layers of identity, expectation, and fear that keep us from experiencing true freedom while we're still breathing. Because the moment you stop clinging to who you think you are and let go of everything you believe you need to survive emotionally or socially, That's the moment you touch something eternal. Most of us live in constant resistance, resisting the unknown, resisting change, resisting loss. We fear death not only because it's unfamiliar, but because it threatens everything we've built our identity around. The roles we play, the masks we wear, the validation we chase. Death doesn't care about any of it, and that terrifies us. But what if, instead of running from that truth, we leaned into it? What if we allowed the illusion of control to dissolve? What if we let the false self die before the body does? To die before you die is to face everything you're attached to, your status, your image, your past, and say, I am not this. It's not an act of despair. It's the most powerful act of liberation. When you let go of the fear of not being someone in the world's eyes, you finally become everything in your own soul. You discover that the essence of who you are was never dependent on any of the stories you've told yourself. You are not your trauma. You are not your success. You are not your name or your bank account or even your memories. Those are expressions, not your essence. When you die before you die, you stop negotiating your worth. You stop performing. You stop trying to earn your place in the world. You simply are. That kind of freedom can't be taken from you. It doesn't waver with public opinion or fluctuate with the market. It's a calm, grounded presence that knows how to sit with both joy and grief and not be swept away by either. The beauty of letting go while you're still alive is that you begin to live differently. You don't grip so tightly. You don't make decisions out of fear of failure or rejection. You no longer chase things for the sake of appearing successful. You seek them only if they're aligned with your truth. And when life inevitably brings loss, as it always does, you're not shattered. You feel the pain, yes, but you're not destroyed because you've already died once. And what remains is real. It's not a one-time moment either. Dying before you die is a practice. It's about choosing each day to surrender just a little more of the false and step into the real. It's in the moment you tell the truth, even when it scares you. It's in the decision to walk away from something safe but soul-draining. It's in the silence you sit in when everyone else is busy proving something. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you're letting a part of the ego die and something timeless rise in its place. And the irony is, the more of the false self you shed, the more alive you become. Life becomes richer, more vibrant, more honest. You laugh more fully, you cry more openly, you listen more deeply, and you begin to see other people not as roles or obstacles or categories, but as fellow souls, each trying to find their way home beneath the noise. That's the gift of dying before you die. It connects you not just to your truth, but to the humanity in everyone. And when the day comes, because it will, when the final breath arrives, you won't panic. You won't resist. You'll recognize it not as the end, but as the next unfolding, the final letting go, and you'll smile, maybe not with your lips, but with your spirit, because you'll know you didn't wait until the end to start living. You didn't cling to what was never truly yours. You let it go, and in that letting go, you found everything that is freedom, and it was always within you.